It really goes without saying at this point, but I love deck builders. But I'm going to say it anyway. I think they're great. They are filled with fun and interesting mechanics about building a wonderful engine, and I just can't ever get enough of them. If I could grind them up and into a fine powder to consume, I would. I'm only joking. I would never do that to one of my precious little babies. I love you. So, in Aeon's End, you and your friends will be taking the role of breach mages trying to defend the land from various enemies and monstrosities through a litany of spells, magical items, and gems. The first player is, well, chosen randomly. Aeon's End is a deck building game, which to briefly summarise is a game in which you start out with a standardised, simple deck, and over a number of turns you'll use those cards in your basic deck to buy better and stronger cards from this centralised market, all in the hope of steadily improving your deck for future turns. And every time you cycle through your deck, you pick up your discard pile, shuffle it, and then you... Stop! Aeon's End does a number of things differently than your traditional deck builder, and not shuffling the deck is one of them. It's really important. Gone are the days of absent-mindedly just shuffling your deck as you await your next turn. Instead, you essentially play your cards, then discard the cards in the order in which you either played them, well, acquired them, and then, used to acquire, and then just simply take your deck, flip it over, and there's your new draw pile. We'll come back to this later because we've barely actually touched upon Aeon's End as a game before we get to the minutiae of deck flipping. Look over here, it's a disgusting hell beast. And down here, it's New Gravetown or something. It's a horrible place to live, and you happen to live there. Each of them have their own health sliders, and if one of them drops to 0, you win or you lose. I'll let you decide as to which one leads to which. To combat this hell beast, you will be taking the role of the breach mage, in which you will play your hand on your turns to prepare spells and buy more cards to power up and do everything you can to hopefully blast it to ribbons. Blasting the hell beast into ribbons isn't as easy as it may initially seem, because you can't just simply play a spell and watch it run off into the maw of the angry hell beast and do some damage. No, instead you have to pay attention to these breaches along the top of your character, which are allowing you to do magic. You slot your spells into your open breaches. You start with one and the rest an array of different rotations, and through the game you'll be rotating your breaches slowly but surely, opening them up one after another until you become an all-powerful mage fueled by breach magic. No, but we'll get onto that later. Don't get carried away there, my young breach mage, because you see, the Nemesis has its own deck of nightmares, being the Nemesis deck, which whenever it has its go, you draw a card, and these things could be anything from doing damage to players or your town, or causing you to discard cards from your hands, or discarding prep spells, or laying down a spell that's going to activate in a few turns and hope you get the money to pay it off. Or worse, monsters that then are summoned into the foray, which you then have to try and defeat, because every future Nemesis turn, the little effect on it is going to activate yet again, and suddenly you've got a lot of effects activating all at once. Oh no! Each hell beast has its own unique little system and scheme going on, which is actually quite quite fun and interesting because it means each boss is, well, its own challenge of sorts. And then also each and every single mage has their own unique little ability and setup and single unique starting card. Plus, if you squirrel away enough little money here and there, you can buy enough charges to ultimately unleash the unique ability and special skill that they have, which makes you feel powerful and strong. No, it doesn't. You see, Aeon's End is a fun, yet quite challenging cooperative deck building experience as you and your friends try to build up these mages to try and overcome anything and everything the game has to throw at you. Like blasting through every enemy before, well, things get really out of hand and really, really bad. And at the same time trying to just lightly optimize your deck. So, trying to just get cards close together so that, the cards you want are together to make good hands a good time. And as play rotates around the board, well, it doesn't. And it's when things begin to get quite bad. Turn order is randomly decided by this turn order deck that consists of 4 cards each for the players and 2 nemesis cards for the nemesis to have a go. And this is where so much of the fun of the game is immediately vaporized, because you see, there's a lot of potential downtime in this game. Like, you could have your go. Hooray! First off the bat, first on the deck. Excellent. You're going to play your turn. You're going to prepare your spells, buy your items, and get ready to unleash all manner of destruction upon the nemesis. That is until you then have to wait for everyone else to have their go, the nemesis to have 2 goes, and then the deck is once again shuffled, of course. And there is a very real chance that your little card will be at the bottom of the deck, meaning that you have to just kind of sit through ultimately 10 whole turns until you have another go, which really you could just sort of get up, leave the table for a bit, I don't know, make some food, have a breakdown, come back, and it still won't even be your go yet. Add in the fact that there is a good possibility that the nemesis could have 2 goes in the deck, back to back at the very end, shuffle those cards again. Oh god, no, it's got 2 goes again at the very start, back to back, 4 goes, back to back, in what we, in the Breach Mage business call bad. And a lot of the effects that all the monsters will be pinging off one after another, getting worse and worse as you're getting steadily decimated. As, the cards aren't just as simple as oh, take some damage, and instead can be things like, oh, discard your entire hand, oh, get rid of all your prepared spells, oh, I don't know, have you got 8 money? You need me, 8, you need to give that to me, because otherwise I'm going to make you discard all of your cards. And it's just not fun. Ugh. Do you see the issue I'm getting at here? This game already has quite a lot of downtime between goes, and when a lot of the nemesis's moves are essentially just there to make you skip your go, it means the downtime is even more, and you're just sat out of the game, bored for so long. Even worse is when there are effects that the hell beasts, the nemesis will do, where it's players among themselves choose to discard basically an entire hand's worth of cards. And then everyone slowly turns to look at the player who definitely has the weakest hand of cards and is mate, we've all got spells that do things, so it's you. And they discard their entire hand and basically take an entire go out, which then means their entire turn behind, so the next time something like that comes about, guess who's discarding their entire hand? It's the person with the deck, because they've gotten rid of all their cards over and over again. However, this game actually works really well with just 2 players, and that is because each player has simply 2 turn cards in the turn card deck. meaning that even if your card is drawn and then immediately drawn again, sure, there will be a large downtime period between your future goes, but you have that chance to play your hand, prepare all your spells, and then immediately perform whatever you were just organizing and planning. You get that immediate satisfaction of pinging spells off into the distance, pow pow, and it's actually good. I'm actually kind of annoyed by this because I rarely actually have any fun playing Aeon's End because, well, there's never this sense of control and power amongst the players. Instead, you're just constantly presented with a sense of misery and dread, as every single thing that comes up is specifically designed to make your life awful. And your curse is only lifted when you inevitably, finally, possibly, just whittle the enemy's health down and the game's gone on long enough to allow you to do that, and finally, the game is over. But in a two-player game, that is less so. Like, I almost had fun playing a two-player game. Heck, I played an entire campaign in a two-player game, and it was actually kind of fun. Campaign? Huh? What? That's right, in an attempt to work out if I was wrong, we have even more Aeon's End with The New Age, which is another sort of standalone core box set, which also contains a campaign mode, which means that you can string together your different combats and attempts on numerous bosses one after another, and doing so you unlock the ability for more spells, but enemies get stronger and they get more and more challenging, but you get more powerful, and it comes with a fun deck of story cards, which are really boring and lame, so those can just go in the bin. The campaigns are actually quite interesting. As you progress through a campaign, the enemies become stronger and stronger with new cards that to add to the deck that are stronger than previous ones, but at the same time you'll unlock more spells that you can possibly use, and more importantly, powerful treasures which have a number of interesting and unique effects. And it's genuinely quite interesting and fun and peculiar to work through. However, do try and make sure that you're doing a campaign, through an app of some form that's kind of designed and has all the cards in mind for this sort of thing. Because otherwise, oh no. Oh God, this game can be an absolute nightmare to try and set up. I get it. A lot of deck builders are quite awful to set up and tear down due to, the fact they've got lots of different sets of cards you've got to try and organize and work out and find where they all are. But Aeon's End asks you if, before you want to even start the game, hey, do you want to have a mental breakdown? Let's set up the Nemesis deck, shall we? First, you end up having to find all the basic Nemesis cards, right? And then, I'll put that down there because that's in the way now. You need to separate them into their respective tiers of tiers 3, 2, and 1. Then you shuffle each stack and you draw as many cards from each tier as according to this table. Obviously keeping them all face down because you don't want any spoilers. And then you find the Nemesis cards for specifically the monster that you've got. So you then take those, separate those out into tiers 1, 2, and 3, then add those to the piles that are the correct ones because everything's face down. You don't want to accidentally add them to the discarded ones. I think it was this one, that one, and let's say that one. Pick each one up, shuffle them again, and then put them in order into a deck of tiers 3, 2, and 1. Then, if you're playing a campaign, it gets a lot worse because you see, every time you get further along the campaign, you'll unlock new upgraded cards, which again, you have to separate into tiers 1, 2, and 3, and then, you know, shuffle those ones. Which ones do you get this time round? Oh, okay, it's these two. Make sure to keep everything face down so you don't know what's happening. And then when you're building your tiers up as the 1, 2, 3, you have to draw fewer cards for every extended upgraded card you have, because the upgraded ones are always in the Nemesis deck, and this means you have more and more face down piles of cards as you're trying to work out, good lord, which is the one that I'm actually trying to use. Then you have to try and work out, like, if you're not using the in-the-box campaign that it comes with, which obviously after your first campaign will be every campaign, it is almost impossible, because you then have to try and work out which random spells you start with, which random spells you gain, which random bosses you fight, which random bosses you continue to go against in the future, which random treasures you unlock, which random heroes you have, and everything is randomized with this massive deck, and there's so much like admin involved. Thankfully, you know, there is an app which you can use, and it makes things slightly better. It's all a bit much. Speaking of a bit much, did you know there is loads of this game? There are 4 core boxes as of time of recording, as well as a legacy box, and then also a million expansions. And each expansion contains, you know, possibly a couple of bosses, a couple of mages, some spells. Each base box has like 4 nemesis and a handful of heroes and a handful of spells, and it is wild, because you see, in this box on the top here, there is a magician who uses surge tokens, but within this box there are literally not a single surge token to use. And this is the box for that one, by the way. Oh god. And the logic used by the publishers was like, well, we've previously had surge tokens in a previous box, therefore we didn't include them in this one because we didn't want to print duplicates. What? Well, I mean, let's just look at one of the previous boxes I've got here. Nope, there's no surge tokens in here either. What? If you love this game, then you have lots and lots, and oh my god, so much lots to play and to get, because each expansion contains like a new boss to play, new heroes to use, more game to involve with and play and maybe enjoy. But also it makes me question the inherent value within the core boxes themselves, because, well, replayability is actually quite lacking within each box. The bosses are, well, essentially just bosses. There's not much adaptability to them, and there's not really that much replayability. You see, if you're stomping Maggoth to death, it doesn't really matter if you're doing it with a particular spell that does 5 damage and a particular effect, or a spell that does 6 damage and a different effect, because ultimately you're just using strong cards to do strong damage, and it kind of sucks. Also, each boss does kind of have a hard mode or an increased difficulty rules mode, and they don't really add that big of a rule change. It's just, Maggoth is just, hey, put down some more stuff every now and then. Well, that's kind of it. Oh, great. A game like Spirit Island has so much replayability because each country has, like, each increase in level, that minor, tiny rules change of starts with an extra town. It changes enough of the game quite substantially that going up each level feels significant. There's more to engage within that game. Aeon's End doesn't have that. Instead, it simply presents you with 4 nemesis in a box, and then quietly reminds you at all times that, you know, whilst you've got that box open, that, hey, did you know that there's more? You can play more. There are more nemesis to play. Hey, did you know you could buy more? And also, that's to the point where even the thing that is on the health marker, that boss, this one, it's not actually in this box. That's in an expansion. So, each of the core boxes cost somewhere between 40 to 50 United Kingdom dollary dues, and they contain 4 nemesis and like a handful of mages and loads of spells, relics, crystals, etc. But the expansions all cost 15 to 20 dollary dues and contain 1 to 2 mages and nemesis and like a handful of spells and other bits and pieces, whatever. But at the same time, the mages are all kind of interesting to an extent. They add like a bit of variance, the spells add a little bit of variance, but never enough variance. Because most of the game is focused and centered on fighting the nemesis. And for so many of them, for so many of these potentially interesting mechanics and interesting ideas, to be ultimately behind paywalls is wild. This game feels almost like a mobile game in how much it's been monetized and how much, like, the amount of DLC has been shot behind paywall after paywall after paywall that, like, I don't know, why is there not a season pass, am I right? I'm not going to make many friends with this review because I know that Aeon's End is a game that a lot of people love. It's a franchise that, whilst people may have probably almost certainly spent too much money on, have definitely fallen in love with because they've probably spent too much money on it. But I just don't like it. I don't think it works as a deck builder. Because for me, deck builders are all about building an engine out of cards with that like spice of luck to spice things up a little bit. But you have this inherently random scheme to try and make something work. But as you add more and more cards, it all becomes more mechanically sound and tightens up and more reliable. Because all the cards play off of one another and mean that, you know, you can draw things more succinctly and have more profound moves every single time. And yet here, well, you just kind of buy big cards to do big damage. You buy the most expensive card you can reasonably buy with your money that does the most damage because, well, it's the best option all the time. The spells have big numbers on them and maybe an effect that's useful in the moment, but from the moment to moment thoughts, well, you're not like, oh, should I get this card or this card? It's like, well, this does damage, I'll pick up this one. And you're no longer building this elaborate machine. You're no longer scheming. You're no longer constructing something that feels personal and insane almost, like most deck builders entail. Instead, you are building a battering ram to just smash through everything possible with your big damage numbers. And honestly, from a deck builder, I wanted more than just buy big cards to do big numbers, to fight big enemies. Aeon's End has a lot of interesting ideas that I cannot fault it for. I really like the cooperative deck builder idea. I like the idea of everyone fighting against these nemesis, and it's quite interesting at times. The breaches and slotting spells in, rotating your breaches to unlock them. There's a lot of interesting mechanics involved. But also, too much of the game feels like it doesn't have that big of an impact. Like the spells and crystals and items, the deck building aspect doesn't have enough variance to make you ever really feel like you're involved in decision making. But also, I just don't have a lot of fun with it. I can't play it with a lot of players because of the amount of downtime involved. And while I can have sort of a good time with 2 players, we have 2 boxes to make it more varied. If we just had 1 box and we're trying to do a campaign, which obviously you could only do with the New Age or the one that's come out later, we're just stuck with 4 nemesis. And I don't think we'd have as much of a good time if we were just limited to fighting the same 4 monster enemies over and over again. There are so many other cooperative games that don't rely heavily on people just sitting out for long periods of time, or other deck builders that have just fun deck building mechanics. What the deck building thing is all about. building an engine that's slightly randomized. That for us all the great and interesting ideas that Aeon Zen presents, that I want to like it, is just a slog, and it's just a bit miserable to play.